Hey everyone, it's your boy Matt here. This is a continuation of all of the of trying to sort out the misbehavior by a man called Michael Armstrong, and hopefully put things to rest. I've tried a few times to put things to rest with this idiot, but he does not want to stop. He wants to continue the drama, and it's kind of getting a bit silly. There's no need to keep up the drama or the agitation. You can move on with your life, mate. Right? Like, I set out to achieve all the goals I wanted to achieve with you. It's done. I did those things to protect myself from the people who were around you who you would not take charge of. And you had many opportunities to dial things down or de escalate. You chose to escalate every single time. And as a result, Michael Armstrong has lost his reputation within the martial arts and military community, particularly the veteran community, because he's no longer seen as a person who can provide leadership to it. He has insufficient moral and ethical character. Now, what's happened? So I'll give you a quick background. Joined a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu gym in Canberra, run by a man called Michael Armstrong. Michael's background was originally in offensive cyber warfare as a part of the army and then the signals directorate. The people in his gym, just by the nature of just knowing the guy, tended to also be associated with these fields, particularly cybersecurity and related things. What ends up happening is I deal with a lot of hacks and similar things from these people. I need to get it to stop because they are attacking my personal and private, information and doing all kinds of weird shit. So what I do is I basically, I first of all ask if I can get the names of people so I can report it to authorities. He refuses to give that. So I then have to get all these people working together in an open and collaborative way. So they formalize their command structure and they formalize their ties, and their misbehavior becomes organized crime rather than just a couple of people misbehaving. And because of that, it can then be identified and tracked, which is what eventually happened, to my knowledge. So I got these people working together to try and hurt me, and I got that reaction because I threatened Michael. And it's always been a legit. It's not never been just a threat. It's been something which is enough to be able to incite the behaviour which I've needed from him. But the thing is that all I wanted was for these people to get together, formalize, and I was always hoping there'd be this moment of self-reflection and understanding in Michael, where he would go, "Wait a second, like this isn't any good. I'm not really going by my values here. I seem to be hurting this guy who was previously a close friend of mine. The people around me seem to be acting terribly. It may be that I'm running a proto-fucking fascist militia here. Like, you know, like why am I hurting this guy? Like, why am I violating this restraining order which I've put out on him?" Which was intended not as a restraining order to protect me, but as a means of weaponizing the police and related forces. And it didn't work. He ended up choking on that thing, thank fucking God. But there's just been all these terrible behaviors, and all I wanted from him was a realization at some point what he was doing and the people around him and all these things were terrible. And he never seemed to get there. He never got there. And I think it's because I grossly overestimated his capacity for self-reflection and for courage. He's not a particularly courageous person. What he does is that when he has a problem is that he puts his head in the sand and he pretends that problem doesn't exist. So that's what he did. He did that over and over again. He would be in denial about all the terrible things which were going on around him because he wanted things to be happy so he could be happy. That's what he was chasing. And I can relate to that. Everyone wants to have a happy life, and I'd like Michael and I to be able to split off our conflict at this point and have our happy lives. The only reason why there has been a conflict, again, has been because of his lack of leadership. Spectacular failings in leadership, actually. But what I've needed is for him to have taken charge of that situation, and he never did. In fact, he tried to weaponize it, because that's the character of this man. And he would do things like stalk me. So he got this fucking restraining order, and then he would start fucking stalking me and trying to find me when I was downtown. And mainly when I was living in Gungahlin, he got very interested in me there. So he would routinely do that. Another thing he would do were these hobo pranks. So one time he dressed up as a homeless person and started interacting with me, which was just really weird. And that was also a violation of his restraining order. So he kept doing this stuff. And there's just been I have no respect for the police or the authorities. And I want to make sure they understand that. Like, you've had this guy being acting like a complete tosspot for all this time, and you've done nothing. And has all these people who have been committing these cyber crimes in his name. And they were committing those cyber crimes beforehand, and those people, a significant chunk of them, do work for organisations like the Australian Signals Directorate and the Army Signals Corps. It's just been a terrible failing by the authorities. But all that's been asked from Michael is to just pack it in and leave me alone. Because the only thing which is continuing the conflict at this point is his continued contact with me. All he needs to do is to stop contacting me or having anything to do with me, and abiding by the fucking terms of the restraining order, and then it's all done. It's all sorted. That's all that needs to happen. This seems to be too much for him. I think there's a degree of ego and not being able to accept defeat. And just silly things like this. All that's been required is for him to shut the fuck up and leave me alone. Because this is not a case where you have a political adversary who you have a disagreement with. This is a case where I have a person who's been actively using government cyber warfare infrastructure to cause a person harm. This is a situation where we've got a person who's networked and gotten themselves access to some pretty nasty people to abuse a person who he has a conflict with, where truly all that needed to happen was for him to say, I've had enough, headed over to the AFP, and that's it. But that's just not in this man. He is and that's why I've kind of been able to, I suppose, dance around him and just make a complete mockery of him, because the normal behaviours, which would be protective and sort of justified in this situation, mainly doing fucking nothing and letting the AFP do their job, is something which he didn't do, and as such, he's kind of dug himself an absolutely massive hole which he cannot get out of. Like, the reputational damage that Michael has done to himself is immense. And again, this has entirely been in my self-defense. That's it. That has been the sole motive for my behavior. I have learned to take joy in my enemy's suffering, but that's not what I tend to be about or wanted to be a person. who was about. It's a shame that this has become part of my personality now, and I don't like that. Like, truly, all I wanted was the specific behaviors from Michael needed for him to hopefully go through a journey and have a realization that he's been acting like a tosser. Because again, like I grossly overestimated this guy's moral character. I thought there was some decency to this bloke, and I was wrong. Um, and for him to take charge of a terrible situation, like that's what I wanted from him. He couldn't do it. There was no point where he was able to have that come to Jesus moment. And so what's ended up happening is that I was able to very much expose the link between him, the people around him, and corruption. And now they're going to have to wear that. It's my hope is for prosecutions to take place, but I'm not very hopeful for this, because the AFP are pretty shit at their job, honestly. And our government does not take, like, they kind of are okay with corruption, because if you're a government police officer and you find yourself in a situation where you're potentially charging another government official, well, that's scary. You don't want to do that. You don't want the idea that you as a government official can be charged and held accountable for your conduct. These people don't like it. They like the system being corrupt and there to be a lack of accountability. They want to feel like they're comrades with each other. So they end up basically vomiting down each other's throats, talking to each other as if they're colleagues, acting as if they're in the trenches together when they're not, right? And we end up with with ingrained and continuing government corruption in these areas. Yeah, it is immensely difficult to get people to do their jobs and inciting people to behave morally or ethically, right? To an extent, like, as a side note, even though I talk so much shit about the Australian government and how and corruption and these things, I think corruption is the norm, right? I think the word corruption is a bad word, because there is this a priori assumption when people saying something is corrupt is that it's fallen from grace. But in most instances, these institutions have never been effective, or never been institutions which have not been corrupt. And that just goes back to it being very difficult to get people to act in a useful way together. So that's a final note on this saga. All I want now, again, I actually wish Michael well. I wish him a fulfilling life. I just wish that our interests could diverge and that we don't need to worry about each other. I don't want to be taking pleasure in his suffering. I want him to fuck off, and I want this saga to be over, and I want to enjoy wholesome things.